This game is proof that you can't judge a book by its desperate desire to imitate early 90s White Wolf games. Hello, I'm Mark Kinney, and this is Those Crazy Games, where this week we fail our saving throw against Homage. Ever since the original World of Darkness burst on the gaming scene in 1991's Vampire the Masquerade, there were fans who immediately swore that the immortals of the movie Highlander would fit into it just fine. Proof came quickly with Hank Driscoll's well-regarded fan supplement, first published on various mailing lists associated with the game in 1993 and revised in 1994. On the gaming side, this supplement set the bar for other fan attempts at systemizing a major creature type for the World of Darkness, and it set that bar high. Naturally, some fans didn't interpret everything the same as Driscoll did, but other than a collectible card game in the late 90s that concentrated more on the television series, there really wasn't an official Highlander presence in the hobby gaming space. This didn't stop people from taking the files to serial numbers and trying to make their own games on the subject, though, as 1993 also saw the release of two actually published RPGs featuring sword-wielding immortals trying to decapitate each other. And don't worry, we'll get to the other one eventually, but of the two, Blackgate Publishing's Legacy War of Ages is the one that came closest to what we saw on screen. Now, of course, in recent months we've gotten Ryan Macklin's Katanas and Trench Coats, which I haven't had a chance to look at yet, but I intend to in the very near future. For this show or not, who knows? We'll see. Getting back to Legacy War of Ages, though, cursory look through the book shows us that not only did they file the serial numbers off of the Highlander concept, the creators of Legacy also seem to want it to very much look and feel like one of those White Wolf books I mentioned. Well, except for the disclaimer that Blackgate expected to be read out loud before each game session, where they imitate Over the Edge instead. Legacy, War of Ages is a work of fiction, and it is solely for entertainment. Legacy, War of Ages does not endorse or support violence, criminal activity, contempt for authority, belief in psychic powers or the supernatural, subversion, political and social diversity, or any other activity not expressly permitted by the laws of the United States of America. You know, nothing like those other games that turn teenagers into rampaging satanic murderers with their psychic blasts and big-ass swords and rainbow-draped copies of the Communist Manifesto and, well, okay about the swords, but yeah. Anyway, to be fair, White Wolf spawned a lot of imitators, from the noun, the gerunding names, to settings that were various shades of adjective punk. Legacy doesn't quite do either of those, but it comes close. Even though the title shook up the aforementioned naming paradigm a bit, the cover was very much something you might expect from a White Wolf cover, down to the poetic back cover text. But once you crack the book open, similarities with early 90s White Wolf really stand out. Screw 11. These guys cranked it up to 12 and ripped the knob off. Legacy opens with a "Look What I've Become" letter, much like Vampire the Masquerade did, and as you start paging through it, they also imitate the White Wolf habit of inserting allegedly relevant cultural quotes at the beginning of important sections of the text. But Blackgate wasn't content to leave it just to where the quotes were appropriate and meaningful. No, this book features a quote anywhere they could make one fit, including both the glossary and the index. Because if anything needs an exciting flash of flavor, it's the index. And in the table of contents, you could have had that Ghostbusters quote about how no human would stack books this way. I mean, come on, it writes itself. You start to notice the art as you keep going. But unlike the evocative art of Tim Bradstreet that defined early White Wolf, this book features pictures of, well, I suppose the creators of the game, running around with swords and wearing trench coats. You know, like you do. Run those pictures through assorted Photoshop filters, and ta-da! You have this game's artwork. Well, I suppose it saves on the art budget, and judging from the rest of the book, this would have been Blackgate's look anyway. Okay, so let's get to the setting. What they call their techno-gothic world. No, it's not something punk, but it's still gothic. Well, no, I can't exactly say it's not something punk, because their setting is a slightly dystopian future with global computer network, accessible via virtual reality simulation if you want, so sure, it's got a cyberpunk flavor to it. Now wait a minute. Near-future dystopia, immortals trying to hide despite globally collected information. You know, maybe you should throw in the planet Zeiss, too, while you're homaging the rest of Highlander 2. Well, then again, given the lack of Zeiss, does that make this the Renegade Edition? There are also extensive sections about running the game, with themes, moods, how to deal with certain types of characters, that kind of thing. Combat, and an extensive and detailed equipment chapter. It also features a White Wolf-like chapter dealing with other supernatural creatures in the techno-gothic world. From Nosferatu and Dwemer Lakes, to Chimera and Warlocks, all for your immortals to face in your very own techno-gothic world. And based on the ad in the back of the book, I'm sure we could expect a series of follow-on games for each of these. So, what about the system? Well, that's actually not too bad. Although they call them different things in the book, it's basically add up a target number of stat plus skill plus other task modifiers and roll the target or less on a d10. There are oddities, like the fact that you can pretty much divide all of the numbers involved in point-by-character generation by 10 with no ill effects whatsoever. I mean, once you've already cribbed the look and feel of White Wolf's games, why get shy about point values? And, of course, strength effects on melee damage are found in the melee weapons section of the equipment chapter, rather than in the actual combat chapter, where it would have made a lot more sense. Legacy also contains more extraneous tables and such than you might expect from a game that talks in its afterword about being a game that stresses role-playing over mechanics. But in general, it's a straightforward and fairly streamlined system. And it's a breath of fresh air from the dice pools that ruled the 90s gaming scene. And I admit, some of those tables affect hand-to-hand combat, which, you know, with combat maneuvers and such, come into play when you're playing an immortal trying to slice other people's heads off. And then they give you a page about melee weapons, enough to avoid being just generic swords, which would be a fatal mistake in a game like this, but not overwhelming you with choices between the 15-inch katana, the 16-inch katana, and the 17-inch katana, and how many tanks you can chop through with each one, because you know katanas do that. I mentioned ads in the back of the book, another habit White Wolf had. A given World of Darkness core book would usually have an ad in the back announcing the subject of the next game in the series. Legacy has one of these for a game called Warlock Black Spiral that was due out in 1995. And there are pages on RPG Geek for a bare-bones release of it. I'm guessing it's a playtest document of some sort. But as far as I know, it never saw actual publication. Blackgate also planned a number of supplements for Legacy, but only one ever saw the light of day, and unfortunately I never did snag a copy of it. I'm keeping my eyes open, though. Now, did they stand a chance? I don't know. Elements of White Wolf's general style and presentation affected much of the tabletop RPG industry in that era, right down to the current iteration of Dungeons & Dragons, even. No, really, look at the race descriptions in the basic rules document and check out how each one has an opinion of the others in nice, encapsulated text. White Wolf pretty much started that. Now, I suppose it's possible to catch lightning in a bottle twice. I mean, White Wolf themselves did it with their reboot into the new World of Darkness in 2004. And Mark Reinhagen, Mr. Vampire the Masquerade himself, is trying it again nowadays, starting with I Am Zombie. But Legacy came out when the original World of Darkness was in its prime, and in that circumstance it's hard not to look like and be dismissed as an imitator when it was, well, an imitator. Now, for those of you who want to check into this game, Battlefield Press currently has Legacy Basic Edition available in PDF form on DriveThruRPG, featuring, quote, all of the robust rules, unquote, but a streamlined setting, whatever the hell that means. That usually goes the other way around, you know? But still, if you can get through the 90s White Wolf Flash, the system actually does kind of work. So there you go. That was Legacy, War of Ages. Hope you kept your head, and barring that, I hope there was someone around to help clean up the mess. Or, you know, not, because poor them. I'm Mark Kinney, and this has been Those Crazy Games. We should be back next week with another vlog, and in 2 weeks we'll get really controversial. So stay tuned, and keep rolling crits.